It starts with a mass funeral in Albania, where families are mourning the loss of their loved ones, all killed because of Brian, a former CIA agent. Among the grieving is Murad, a local leader determined to get revenge for his son's death, which was caused by Brian. Next, Brian visits his ex-wife Lenor's place one afternoon. Just to catch you up, Lenor is Brian's ex, and they have a daughter named Kim. Last year, Kim got kidnapped by an Albanian gang while she was on vacation in Paris. She almost ended up in human trafficking, but Brian saved her by tracking the kidnappers through their voice recordings. Now, Brian plans to take Kim for a driving lesson, but when he gets home, he finds out she's out with her boyfriend. As a concerned dad, he's a little upset that Kim didn't tell him. Lenor tries to calm him down, saying maybe Kim just doesn't want her boyfriend feeling watched by her ex-CIA agent dad. Brian quickly figures out where Kim's boyfriend lives. Kim is a bit surprised to see her dad just show up, but to avoid an argument, she goes along with it and gets in the car for the driving lesson. The mood is tense the whole time because of Brian's overprotective nature. Trying to lighten the mood, Brian promises he'll trust Kim more, especially about her boyfriend. But as soon as she's out of the car, Brian calls Sam to get some background info on the guy. Meanwhile, Jean, Brian's friend in Paris, just gets home when a group of Albanian gangsters shows up. They grab him and force him to give up info on who killed their brother in Paris a while back.
But I'm a good player too.
One afternoon, as Brian was getting ready to pick up Kim for a driving lesson, he was surprised to see his ex-wife Lenor looking really upset. Turns out, she had just had a big fight with her husband Stuart about their canceled trip to China. Trying to cheer her up, Brian invited Lenor and Kim to come with him to Turkey, where he had some business to take care of. 4 days later, after finishing his job escorting a businessman in Turkey, Brian was surprised when Kim and Lenor showed up out of nowhere without any warning. Meanwhile, the Albanian Mafia tracked down Brian and started planning how to go after him. Murad and his crew finally made it to the Turkish border. Once in Istanbul, Murad met with his associate who had been watching Brian's moves for days and was getting ready to strike. The next morning, Brian, Kim, and Lenor were about to head out for a meal, but Kim decided to stay back at the hotel because she wanted to swim. Brian and Lenor went ahead, though Brian had a feeling they were being watched. When he saw their car was being followed, Brian quickly told Lenor how to escape from the Mafia 6.
Are you ready?
No.
When you exit the back of the fabric store, turn right. Come on, move!
Making sure Kim was safe at the hotel became Brian's #1 priority. He quickly came up with a plan to send Lenor back to the hotel while he distracted the pursuers. A wild chase followed. While driving, Brian tried calling Kim to check on her, but she didn't answer. As the number of enemies grew, Brian's car got trapped. But using his smarts, he managed to weave through a crowded market and escape, even though they had him cornered. With his skills, Brian took down the enemies. But Lenor didn't get away as planned. She was caught by the Mafia when she realized the route she took ended up being a dead end. In this dire situation, Brian finally got through to Kim and told her that he and Lenor had been caught. He told her to hide right away, knowing the bad guys would soon be after her too. Brian and Lenor were forced into a car by the Mafia. Meanwhile, Kim became their next target. Luckily, Brian had told her to hide in her hotel room right away. But the Mafia wasn't giving up and started searching Brian's room. Kim ran into trouble with her keycard, so she had to climb across the balcony to the next room. Soon after, the group broke into Brian's room. At that point, Kim could only rely on her luck as they searched every corner. Just when they were about to check the closet she was hiding in, one of them accidentally shot the guest in the next room, causing hotel security to rush in. In the car, with his eyes closed, Brian started planning his escape. He paid attention to every turn, the sounds of traffic and the stops. Even without seeing, he made mental notes of everything to figure out where they might be taking him. After they were captured, Brian and Lenor got separated. Luckily, the guards didn't fully know who Brian really was, which made them careless. Taking advantage of that, Brian quietly pulled out a hidden phone he always kept in his sock, planning his next move without drawing attention. Brian quickly called Kim to make sure she was safe. He firmly told her to run and not worry about him and her mom. But Kim refused to leave and insisted on staying until her dad was safe. Brian then guided Kim to open a secret suitcase hidden in the closet. At that moment, Brian's clever plan came into play as he used a trick to figure out exactly where he was. First, Brian told Kim to draw 2 circles on a map to calculate the radius of where he might be. To make it easier, he asked her to throw explosives onto an empty rooftop. By listening to the sound of the impact, Brian could guess how far he was from their hotel. Brian told Kim to grab some gear and wait at the spot they had picked as his hideout. Not long after, Murad started questioning Brian. He showed him pictures of the dead Mafia members, including his son Marco. In response, Brian was set to be taken to Murad's hometown for punishment. To get his revenge, Murad told his men to hurt Lenor, even if it was just a small injury. But they hung her upside down, and she started bleeding badly. It was clear that Lenor would be in real danger from blood loss within half an hour. Soon after, Murad heard that Kim had escaped. He quickly sent most of his men to find her. When they caught Kim, they planned to get Brian out of Istanbul. But things didn't go as planned because Brian managed to escape and save Lenor, who had already lost a lot of blood. Meanwhile, Kim made it to the spot her dad had told her about. They talked again, and Brian told Kim to set off an explosive. The blast helped Brian figure out where Kim was. He then told her to set off another explosive after walking 30 steps to the east. Finally, Brian figured out where he was. He told Kim to drop her gear into the smokestack. As soon as the guards came in, Brian was ready to fight back. Kim quickly took off as the Mafia guys started realizing she was there. While Brian was taking down the guards who were distracted by the football game, they didn't notice he was slipping away. Once he had knocked them all out, Brian hurried to the roof to help Kim, who was trying to get away from the Mafia chasing her. Afterward, Brian and Kim found a taxi and decided to use it to get Lenor, who was looking weak from blood loss. But things got more complicated when another one of Murad's men showed up, making the situation even worse. Brian told Kim to wait for him for 5 minutes. If he didn't come back by then, she was supposed to run to the American embassy in Istanbul to find safety. The Mafia was planning to move Lenor to another place, which made Brian search every room to find her. But just when he was about to succeed, she had already been taken. At the same time, the police showed up, but they turned out to be Murad's corrupt men. With Lenor already gone, Brian's main focus was keeping Kim safe. They decided to head to the American embassy. But things got worse after Brian shot a corrupt cop. Now they had 2 problems: the Mafia and the police. Even though Kim didn't have a driver's license, the emergency made her pull off some pretty tough moves. There was only one Mafia car left, and Brian smartly guided Kim to trap them on the train tracks.
Go! Go! Wait! Come on!
Even though things seemed safer, Brian still told Kim to keep the gas pedal down as they drove into the embassy. The guard at the front instantly started shooting at their car, making the situation even tenser. Brian did all this to make sure they were surrounded by security, keeping the Mafia from chasing them. Once they got to the front of the embassy, Brian quickly called Sam to get them rescued fast. As soon as Kim was safe, Brian got right back to searching for Lenor. Meanwhile, Lenor was being held in an apartment somewhere, making Brian race against time to find her. Brian started his search in places that could be where Lenor was being held, using his memory to guide him. Eventually, Brian got to the front of the enemy headquarters. To get in, he had to deal with a bunch of guards keeping watch. He carefully tried to take them down one by one without setting off any alarms. The Mafia, feeling too confident, didn't think Brian would find them so fast. They were just having a good time until Brian managed to sneak in and take them out. The sound of gunfire caught Murad and his men's attention right away, letting them know Brian was there. Soon after, they decided to move Lenor somewhere else. The guards started searching for Brian. They tried to take him on, but none of them managed to hit him. Instead, they found themselves no match for him. Murad ran with Lenor through the market until they found a hiding spot in an old building. At this point, only one guy from his team was left. Don't be fooled, he was Murad's right-hand man. Even though Brian found their hiding place, this guy was as skilled in a fight as Brian. In the last moments, as Brian felt worn out, he pulled off a counterattack that took his opponent down. Brian found Lenor unconscious in a restroom. At first he panicked, but after checking on her, he realized she had just fainted. Meanwhile, Murad was all alone. Using the phone of a fallen gang member, Brian called Murad to reveal where he was hiding. But when they met, Brian felt a bit sorry for Murad, realizing that if he died, a lot of people in his village might want revenge. Brian was tired of the endless conflict. As a sign of goodwill, Brian put his gun down before leaving the area. But from the start, he had seen this coming. He had purposely given Murad an unloaded gun. Now, Murad had to deal with the consequences of his actions, which broke their promise. 3 weeks later, Brian was at the licensing office with Kim for her driving test. After 3 tries, Kim finally passed with a perfect score. To celebrate this achievement, they invited Lenor to lunch at a restaurant, and Kim brought her boyfriend too. At that moment, Brian started to realize that his daughter had grown into a young woman, no longer the little girl who always needed looking after. That's how the story of the second Taken movie wraps up. Stay tuned for the continuation in the next video.